Welcome to Live the Dream with yours truly, Marty Kaiser. Buckle up and let's get started. Good afternoon. This is Marty Kaiser with our Tuesday edition of Real Estate Tidbits. Hope everyone is doing well and had a great weekend. I'm sure we're all looking forward to the long Labor Day weekend. That'll be on Monday. And as usual, it's hot out, so stay hydrated. Today, I wanted to kind of do I guess the easiest way to refer to it would be kind of a pro-con assessment, or maybe a devil's advocate assessment to look at one side of a coin versus another. So I'd start off with, they had a national article that came out on CBS News, and it actually came out yesterday. And it's kind of right in line with what we've been chatting about on this podcast, but I thought I'd read a few portions of it just to give some insight into some of the explanations that I've given over the last couple months. And it started off reading like this: in a sign of home sellers' frustration with how long it's taking to sell their properties, more owners are opting to pull their homes off the market rather than lower the asking price. And that's actually according to a recent report from Realtor.com, which obviously is the National Association of Realtors website. And they found that what is referred to in the industry as D-listings, DE listings, or homes taking off the market without having been sold, were up 38% in June since the start of 2025, and 48% from a year ago. So basically what they're also saying is that fewer and fewer sellers are deciding to enter the market, and increasingly more are deciding to jump out, said a senior economist at Realtor.com. One indicator that the sellers are exiting the housing market is the ratio between delistings and listings. For every 100 new homes listed nationally in June, 21 homes were taken off the market. So that's up from 13 delisted homes that took place in May. So basically the essence of this statistics and my explanation is a couple things. Number one, as delistings go up, it creates more of what I call a deadlock or a difference of opinion between buyers and sellers. Because obviously the reason that sellers are delisting in increasing quantities is they're not willing to sell their house for less than what they have it on the market at. And in those situations, due to the transition we're having on the market and some of the other variables, what they have it on the market for is above the market value, and consequently it's sitting. So those sellers have made what I would call a pronounced decision that they're either going to hold on to their house and try it at a later date when, in their minds, the market conditions have changed, or if they're in a financial position to do so and they still want to move, they could always lease the house. But what it's saying is that the spread between sellers and buyers is not lowering. If anything, it's decreasing, because buyers are looking for better value and sellers in these situations are holding firm. So it's kind of keeping the real estate market in a holding pattern. At the same time, this trend is more pronounced at the same time that the supply of homes in certain regions is increasing, which, because not as many homes are selling, it's causing prices in those areas to drop. So the prices from the sold situations are dropping, But the folks that are delisting and don't want to follow where the trends are pulling their home on the market. So you have a lot of conflicting opinions. So the forecast by a lot of these experts right now is that home sales are remaining stagnant because obviously, even though prices have gone down a little bit, they're still a lot more expensive than they were a few years ago. And the mortgage rates really haven't come down much. So the combination of higher mortgage rates and higher selling prices is having a big impact on the number of transactions. And I think in most parts of the country, transactions have definitely declined. Now, according to Realtor.com, in July, transactions fell 3% compared to the same period last year. So that's not a huge difference. But again, keep in mind that transactions in 2024 were below 23 levels. So we've had 2 years of declining transactions. And so basically, what has occurred here is kind of what I call a disequilibrium. And if you remember some of my podcasts when I talk about how much information I share with the sellers, and that if the sellers and I have too wide a gulf on what I think their price should be relative to what they want to price their home at, in some cases I've had to walk away from prospective listings. And because I feel it's very detrimental if somebody lists the house significantly more than I feel it's worth. Not that I'm 100% foul-proof, so to speak, but most of the time, if I give advice like that, I'm usually pretty much on point. And what ends up happening, as I've mentioned a couple times, is that when houses go on the market significantly overpriced, either they won't sell or the sellers will go through a series of price adjustments until they come up with the proper pricing strategy. And then ultimately their home will sell for less than it would have sold for had it been priced properly. So this is obviously specific to each region and to each neighborhood, but it's why the trends and the data analysis are so important. I think a lot of sellers have gotten spoiled by the high prices that took place in 21, 22, and 23, but we're definitely seeing softness in many of the markets. Now in Florida, for example, Miami is one of the places where sellers have been least willing to budge on price. There in Miami, they've had 59 homes delisted for every new 100 listings. So that's a huge number. And in fact, it was the highest ratio among the cities that Realtor.com tracked. And interestingly, along with that, in Miami, less than 18% of homes in Miami came with a price reduction. So in Miami, a lot of these folks are just taking their house off the market. And of course, a lot of these folks have a belief that the market is going to change in the not too distant future. So they're willing to hold on to their property. So it's interesting how these things work, and everybody has their own opinion on it. But I would say my main advice in this particular topic for sellers are you have to have done your homework, and when you chat with a realtor or realtors, listen carefully to their input, their data. See if you feel comfortable that they're logically explaining things to you backed up with facts, and then make an educated decision on two things. Number one, who you're going to go with, And number two, are you going to sell your home? As I mentioned on our last podcast, I don't go out on an appointment just with the expectation of getting a listing and just collecting listings. If somebody lists their property with me, I want to tell them confidently I'm going to sell the property and it's not going to sell, and it should sell relatively expeditiously. So I have a perspective that I feel is very justified, and it's to the benefit of everybody. But anyway, that's my take on it. Now, when I started the podcast today, I was talking about counterpoints. Well, what do I mean by counterpoints? Well, not only in real estate, but in a lot of things that we experience in life, there can be two different perspectives. You know, one group can have opinion A, and another group can have opinion Z. And they can be on the same topic, and theoretically, the data is the data. Of course, maybe everybody's referring to different data, but, you know, who is it that one group is right over the other? Or is it that both groups are too extreme and they need to settle more in the middle? And I'll give you a couple examples of that. Like you've heard me talk about some of the things going on with our government that have been a little bit different than the norm. So two things I happen to take particular interest in over the last few days. Well, one of the things we had talked about a little bit, how President Trump is putting a lot of pressure on the Fed to go ahead and lower the interest rates. And the Fed, as you know from listening to me, is supposed to be totally independent of any political influence. And they're supposed to make decisions on what they feel is best for the U.S. economy. How do they keep it prosperous? How do they keep inflation under control? Things of that nature. So these folks are all, for the most part, credentialed economists, and I'm sure some of them are more conservative and some are a little bit more liberal. But nonetheless, they've had years of experience doing this, and they were appointed to their roles because of their expertise, and hopefully that they are not biased or influenced by politics. And so what happened, I think, yesterday, President Trump went ahead and fired one of the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. Now, she's not the one in charge, but she's one of the panel of people that make up this decision-making group. So it's expected that she's going to take legal action to say that President Trump had no right to do that. It should be an interesting case. But I think what's more important and more concerning is that if President Trump gets away with this, then regardless of who's president in the future, whether they're Republican or Democrat, whether they're conservative or liberal, if they can start having control over these independent bodies, then pretty much we've lost all credibility. And if one of these politicians has more of an extreme opinion and they're wrong, it could be really extremely detrimental for our economy. So it's definitely something that people should pay close attention to. The other thing, again, which relates to our culture, but the political spectrum, is that there's been a tradition for over 100 years that when judges of a certain rank are nominated for positions in a particular state, that if both senators oppose this nomination, they will withdraw the nomination. There's a term for it, and I don't remember what the term is, but I guess it's an established protocol in the Senate. So whether the two senators are of the same party or whether they're of different parties, if both feel strongly about the candidate's not the best qualified or is an extremist, that nomination will be withdrawn. And the logic is, for the most part, now this isn't true in every situation, but they're trying to eliminate judges that are going to rule with their political views and not what the law states, because that would be very dangerous. Just think if you had a judge that was super liberal or super conservative, and their philosophy was, we're always going to rule with the conservative Republicans or we're always going to rule with the liberal Democrats. That would not be a good thing for the country. Obviously, everybody has a little bit of bias. It's pretty hard to be 100% impartial, but it's very scary if you have somebody to those extremes that are setting laws in our country. And so, again, President Trump is up in arms about that, and he's actually up in arms with a senator in, I think, Chuck Grassley. I don't remember what state he's in. That's been a senator for about 40-odd years, and he's a conservative Republican. But President Trump is not happy with his politics on this particular topic, so he's trying to get this changed. Now, it's a gray area because it's not a law. It's just an established practice that the Senate's done for over 100 years. So, we'll see. One thing about President Trump, he'll push the legal system to its limits until it explodes. Attorneys love having President Trump in office because they do more business with wealthy and powerful people than they've ever done. President Trump is an expert at weaponizing the legal system and trying to wear people down, trying to outspend people that don't have the resources that he does. And it's proven to be a very effective technique in both his business and political career, especially in business, because when he gets into a vehement disagreement with a business person, he's usually in a much stronger position monetarily and can just wear them down. Either he can wear out their resources or their stress levels, their quality of life, where he seems to be above that. Nothing seems to really change the way he operates. So it's an interesting contrast with most people that are more what I would call mainstream. So we'll see. But we're definitely in a country, not just because of President Trump, but over the last 20, 30 years, that we've got such opposing views on seemingly everything. You read about a lot of this stuff in Florida that goes on, kind of Governor DeSantis copies a lot of President Trump's techniques, but a little bit more on a quieter basis. He tries to get the same results, but in a less controversial way. And he's been reasonably successful with a lot of the things that he's done that are contrary to what has taken place in the past. When it comes to the real estate industry, and I bring this opposite situation up, there's a lot of agents, especially I find in the younger demographics, that are strictly technological and metrics related, meaning that they use AI for a lot of their analysis. They use statistical compilations for a lot of their analysis, and they're heavily reliant on technology. And all those things are good to a degree. And what do I mean by that? Well, obviously, technology's made life, in a lot of cases, easier. AI can be a good framework. It can certainly reduce the time that you spend on certain tasks because it takes away a lot of your thought. You can just plug in and ask questions and kind of copy what AI tells you. When it comes to data is definitely something that you should look at, but it shouldn't be the end-all, be-all, in my opinion. You have to incorporate all these different aspects with the human aspect. So when you're dealing with customers or other agents for that matter, there has to be some humanity that goes on. If you're strictly kind of like a robot or a computer, I think the negatives outweigh the benefits. I know I'm probably in the minority. Everybody kind of feels, oh, AI's here to stay. It's just going to get more and more. But I think that has a lot of negative potential consequences. And I think the people in the people business, such as real estate agents, the ones that are going to have the long-term staying power and that are going to be successful are going to incorporate some of these more effective time-saving techniques along with always maintaining their humanity and their interest in making sure that they're communicating properly to their customers and they're trying to take the customer's interest into account at all times. There has to be a melding of things. And I've always been, if you've listened to me over the last year plus, and I've talked a little bit about that I'm an independent when it comes to politics, I try to take more of a moderate position on most things. I don't go with the flow. If I think the flow is not positive, I'm going to say so. And I don't necessarily identify with one segment on the other. I do use AI for some things, but I try to keep it within reason. I think I mentioned on one of my podcasts that I thought it was interesting because a lot of the agents that I deal with, their writing skills are about at fourth grade level. And I've read some of their communications in the past, and I just kind of scratched my head on how our educational system has let a lot of people down. And then all of a sudden their communications improve because they're letting AI write their stuff. And so they sound a lot more intelligent, but do they really know what they just told you? I question that because I don't. It's kind of like when people used to use, back in the day, you used Cliff Notes. Instead of reading the book, you use Cliff Notes for a summary of what the book said, so that when you went in for a test or a book report, you just paraphrased the Cliff Notes. And you might have gotten by with that in terms of your school grades, but did you really know the material? I know myself, I take pride in things that I learned years ago in school. I learned them so I can still refer to them nowadays, just like some of the historical acts, that history repeats itself, some of the mistakes politicians made, some of the economic mistakes we've made, some of the pandemic mistakes we've made. You have to be a student of history also and try to do your own analysis. If people do no analysis, we might as well just have a bunch of robots telling us what to do. Am I old-fashioned? Maybe some people would call me old-fashioned, but I think I try to take the 21st century common sense viewpoint as use the advances that are going to help us, but always keep in mind of humanity, that you need to communicate with people, and that you need to make common sense solutions. If something doesn't sound good to you after you think about it, then it's probably not a good solution. So anyway, that's all for today. I welcome everybody's thoughts. Have a good rest of the week, and we'll see you on Friday. This is Marty Kaiser out.